The barn sat on the edge of my property, a rustic relic from a past era that had hosted generations of harvests before settling into its current life. As a sanctuary for my thoughts, its weathered boards whispered stories in the wind. Offering a serene retreat from the clamor of the world beyond my fields, I often found solace in its quiet corners, where the scent of hay mingled with the faint memory of horses long gone. Life around here was mostly calm, the kind of slow-paced existence that gently coaxed one into appreciating the small details. The sun's journey across the sky was a metronome for my days, each ticking second marked by the subtle shift of light through the barn's wooden slats. I reveled in this quietude, a stark contrast to the bustling suburbs that encroached ever closer. Then came Karen. Her arrival was like a gusty wind, scattershot and disruptive, blowing through the neighborhood with an intensity that left no leaf unturned. She was the sort of person who thrived on the minutiae of other people's lives, finding purpose in the petty enforcement of homeowners association bylaws, where others saw community. Karen saw a fiefdom. It began innocuously enough, a curt note on my doorstep, reminding me of a forgotten lawn ornament, a gentle reprimand about the unsightly wildflowers that lined my driveway. I laughed it off, these small absurdities a mere ripple in my otherwise untroubled existence. But Karen escalated. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned each property like a hawk. In her wake, neighborly whispers transformed into a chorus of resigned compliance. For some reason, she took particular interest in my barn, the old structure becoming a peculiar fixation for her. At first, it was the mailbox notices, paint peeling. She'd written, as if the barn's weathered facade was a personal affront. Then, a pointed comment slipped casually during a chance encounter at the mailbox. That barn should really be put to better use. Don't you think? Her words dripped with implication, a thin veneer of concern barely masking the intrusion beneath. I shrugged it off, a gentle nod, a quiet agreement to contemplate her suggestion. But inside, I felt the tether of my patience slowly fraying. The barn was my haven, a silent partner in my solitude, and I was not inclined to alter its purpose to suit her whims. It was a few weeks later when I noticed the shift. The barn, once an echo of my own solitude, now buzzed with uninvited activity. Strangers milled about my property, their disregard for my boundaries evident in the careless way they trampled the daisies lining my path. Karen was hosting a party. The audacity of it all settled in slowly, like water seeping through cracks. The barn, my barn, had been commandeered, festooned with ribbons and balloons. The quiet sanctuary transformed into the epicenter of noise and frivolity. I watched from a distance, a silent observer to this invasion. My heart a steady drumbeat of disbelief. An odd calmness settled over me, a quiet resolution that I cradled like a secret. In their revelry, they had forgotten the barn's most peculiar feature, its doors, stubborn with age, that could only be locked from the outside. I turned the key in my hand, feeling the weight of it, the cool metal promising a resolution that only I could deliver. The following morning began with a falsely serene sunrise, casting a gentle light across my herb garden. Still untouched by the whirlwind of chaos that lay ahead, I sipped my coffee, watching the steam curl like a cat stretching in the sun, blissfully unaware of the storm that Karen had already set in motion. As the clock struck 8, the tranquility shattered. My phone buzzed with the hum of a swarm of bees' emails, notifications, a digital cacophony heralding the arrival of Karen's wrath. The HOA's website displayed a new page, an array of regulations that seemed tailored specifically for my existence, curiously specific, like a bespoke suit for chaos. First came the citations, clean and clinical in their precision. My grass, apparently, was 2 inches too high. I hadn't noticed, but it seemed Karen had, with a hawk's eye for every blade. Then there was the fence, which supposedly violated some obscure aesthetic code. Its rustic charm now deemed an offense to suburban symmetry. The barn, of course, was non-compliant, its very presence a defiance of the pristine homogeneity she sought to enforce. Whispers swept through the neighborhood like a cold front. Karen's voice, slick with saccharine concern, shaped the narrative. Rumors sprouted like mushrooms in the damp aftermath of her storm. My barn, once a solitary refuge, transformed into an outlaw hideout. Home to my imagined schemes and villainous plots, I was painted as a recluse, a dissenter, the antagonist in a story she was crafting with every wag of her tongue. The irony tasted bitter. I was the villain disrupting her curated utopia. Yet it was she who had trespassed, commandeering my space for her lavish soiree. Her hypocrisy had the elegance of a bull in a china shop, oblivious to the destruction it caused amongst delicate porcelain lives. The neighborhood watch convened on my front lawn, a silent jury, their eyes heavy with judgment formed from whispered half-truths. They didn't need to speak. Their presence was enough. An unspoken verdict hung in the air, a collective shunning orchestrated by Karen's influential hand. I breathed in, drawing the air deep as if to anchor myself amidst the brewing tempest. My mind wandered through the woods of my thoughts, seeking paths untamed by Karen's machinations. The barn stood resolute, a fortress against the encroaching tide of her absurdity. In the quiet moments, I strategized, not for vengeance, but for preservation. My strength lay in patience. In the quiet resilience of the oak tree weathering the storm, the barn, with its locked doors, now served as a symbol of boundaries, of respect demanded, not begged for. The irony is sharp as the morning frost, biting my senses awake. Karen's party was meant to be a display of her dominance, her control over our small world. Yet, in her quest to own the narrative, she had given me the keys to rewrite the story. Each citation, each whisper, was a brushstroke in the portrait of absurdity she was unknowingly painting for herself. I smiled. A small, private thing. The barn would remain locked. The tales spun around it. Her own snare. Let the neighborhood talk. Let the whispers grow. In the quiet of my resolve, I found a curious peace. I watched the sun climb higher, burning away the morning fog with a relentless clarity. Just like that, the day stretched before me, a canvas ready for the strokes of my quiet rebellion, a story yet to unfold in the shadow of Karen's unraveling plan. I watched the barn from the kitchen window as the sun began to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows that threatened to swallow the structure whole. Inside, I imagined the revelry reaching its apex, laughter bouncing off wooden walls, echoing into the fields, like a misplaced symphony. The barn, a solemn guardian of hay and history, now found itself an unwilling host to the prattle of Karen and her entourage, each one more oblivious than the last. I had spent the afternoon preparing, not with the zeal of a warrior setting traps, but with the calm precision of a gardener planting seeds, meticulous, calculated. I documented everything, each transgression laid bare under the lens of my camera. The raucous entry, the unauthorized decorations, balloons in all the wrong colors, and most incriminating of all, the cars parked with the reckless abandon only Karen's minions could muster. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about balance, an ecosystem disrupted by a rogue element, needing gentle correction. I moved with quiet purpose, each step deliberate, unfurling my plan under the watchful gaze of the evening. The lock was old but reliable, a steadfast sentinel that had kept the barn's secrets for decades. I didn't replace it, just added a chain, a subtle reinforcement, the way one might add a lock to a diary filled with the most scandalous thoughts. They wouldn't see it coming, not in their champagne haze. As the evening unfurled its star-speckled tapestry, I waited, time stretched, a taut string ready to snap. The longer I lingered, the more I noticed the inevitable. The laughter inside had taken a sharper edge, a sign that the party teetered on the brink of chaos. It wouldn't take much, just a gentle nudge. The first knock on the barn door was faint, almost polite. It spoke of uncertainty, of a realization beginning to dawn. My heart quickened. Though I was careful not to betray it, I busied myself with the garden, pruning roses under the moonlight. Thorns pricked my fingers, a reminder of nature's own brand of justice, its quiet but unwavering stance against disorder. Occasional shouts floated through the night air. Muffled by the wooden walls, the barn stood solid, a fortress of stubborn dignity against the waves of protest crashing against it. I imagined Karen at the helm, her voice rising above the din, a conductor amidst discordant notes. But outside, the world remained indifferent, the crickets continuing their serenade, an audience immune to human folly. A final shout, tinged with desperation, pierced the evening. I approached the barn slowly, savoring the stillness. My fingers brushed the lock as a wave of calm washed over me. The moment was ripe, teetering on the cusp of resolution and release. A pause, and then the door swung open. Karen staggered into the night, her heels sinking into the earth as if the land itself sought to reclaim her. She glared, a tempest brewing in her eyes, but words eluded her. Behind her, the partygoers trickled out, chastened murmurs rising into the cool night air, like leaves carried away by a gentle breeze. The irony hung heavy, a tapestry of poetic justice woven from the threads of their own hubris. They departed, leaving only the barn and the stars as witnesses to their folly. I turned back to the house, the quiet once more a balm to my senses, the balance restored. The night settled in around me, a blanket of peace draped over a world briefly unraveled. The sun hung low, casting its amber glow through the thin slats of the barn. Dust motes danced lazily in the ethereal light, oblivious to the simmering chaos below. Inside, the noise was a cacophony, a mix of forced laughter, muffled complaints, and the occasional clink of glasses. The air was thick with tension, brewing like a summer storm on the horizon. Outside, I watched from a distance, concealed by the sprawling oak that had witnessed decades of human folly. The barn, my barn, commandeered by Karen and her entourage, stood like a fortress of misplaced entitlement. It was as though the walls themselves resisted the intrusion, groaning softly under the weight of unwelcome festivity. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the discordant symphony emanating from within. Curiosity and concern etched on their faces. They whispered amongst themselves, their eyes flicking between the barn and my secluded post, like moths to a flame. Their numbers grew, forming a semicircle of anticipation around the barn's imposing facade. Tension hung in the air, palpable and electric. The community was a tightly woven tapestry, threads of camaraderie and rivalry entwined. Karen had pulled too hard on those threads, and now the seams threatened to unravel. Her parties were legendary, not for their grandeur, but for the friction they incited, like flint and steel sparking inevitable fire. I remained still, an observer in this unfolding drama. My heart beat a steady rhythm, a drum marking time, synchronized with the distant thrum of restless energy inside the barn. A locked door, a simple barrier, yet so effective in shifting the balance of power. It was an irony Karen would appreciate, if only she had the clarity to see it. Time crawled forward, each second a cautious step through a minefield of escalating tension. The voices inside grew louder, tinged with frustration and a rising sense of urgency. I imagined Karen at their center, her composure slipping, the mask of control cracking like ice under strain. Outside, the crowd's murmurs swelled. The whispers carried speculation like leaves on the wind. Some spoke of justice, others of folly. All were united in their shared spectacle. The barn a stage for a play none had anticipated. It was a scene ripe with irony. Karen, who thrived on attention, now the unwitting star of a drama she could not direct. A single voice rang out, clear and cutting through the noise. A question, a demand for explanation that left the air vibrating with its echoes. The crowd shifted, a ripple of expectation passing through them like an electric current. I held my breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. The barn stood silent for a beat, then erupted in a fresh wave of sound. It was the sound of realization, the dawning comprehension of choices and their inevitable consequences. Behind the wooden walls, the party was evolving, morphing from celebration to confrontation. The sun dipped lower, its golden light slowly giving way to shadow. The barn, now a silhouette against the evening sky, seemed to hold its breath, waiting. I felt the world pause, suspended in the twilight between past decisions and future reckonings. Tension had reached its zenith. Now, it was only a matter of time, and I was ready to see how it all unfolded. The moon hung low, casting a silvery glow over the fields as I watched the barn from my kitchen window. Inside, the echoes of the raucous party were muffled by the thick barn walls. Karen's high-pitched laughter occasionally pierced the night, a sharp reminder of her audacity. It was almost poetic, how a woman so intent on controlling everything had found herself trapped by her own arrogance. As the night deepened, silence gradually replaced the earlier chaos. The guests, oblivious to their captivity, surrendered to exhaustion or drink, their energy dwindling like the flickering candle flames inside. The barn, a steadfast sentinel in the night, stood firm. Outside, the crickets resumed their song, nature reclaiming its rightful rhythm. I glanced at the clock. The legal gears were already in motion. While Karen had been busy plotting her grand soiree, I had been quietly gathering evidence. The trespass was documented, the violations catalogued, and the plans for a lawsuit meticulously prepared. Karen's reign of terror would soon face the cold, unyielding logic of the law. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing that justice, though slow, was inevitable. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen, who had made it her mission to enforce neighborhood rules with an iron fist, would now find herself ensnared by the very regulations she wielded so mercilessly. It was a reminder that power abused is power eventually stripped away. As dawn approached, the first signs of life stirred within the barn. Shadows moved behind the windows, figures stretching and yawning. Unaware of the night's quiet machinations, the door rattled briefly, followed by a pause as the realization of their predicament settled in. A muffled exclamation, barely audible, reached my ears. The irony of the moment was as sweet as the morning air. Yet, vengeance was never the goal. Karen and her followers would soon be released, chastened, perhaps, by the lesson of their own making. The barn would stand again as a symbol of quiet resilience, a testament to those who believed that might did not always make right, that justice could be both patient and potent. A single document lay ready on my desk, its crisp pages a silent promise of accountability. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of lavender and gold, I felt a sense of resolute calm. This was not a victory born of spite, but of principle, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful actions are those executed with grace and quiet determination. The barn door eventually swung open, a creak echoing into the morning like a sigh of relief. Karen emerged, her expression a mix of confusion and indignation. Her eyes scanned the horizon, searching for something to anchor her outrage. But the world had changed in those few short hours. The balance shifted. As I stepped outside, the cool air filled my lungs, invigorating and fresh. The barn stood in solidarity behind me, a silent ally. Karen's gaze met mine across the distance. She opened her mouth, perhaps to hurl the accusations I had anticipated, but I raised my hand, a gesture both of farewell and of finality. Words were unnecessary. The papers in my hand spoke louder than any argument. Turning away, I walked back into the house, the door closing with a gentle thud behind me. The promise of a new day lay ahead. Untainted by past grievances, the legal proceedings would unfold, slowly and surely, as they always did. But for now, there was peace, and it was enough. The barn was still, save for the distant murmur of voices inside. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath, the autumn air thick with anticipation. My heart, usually a steady drum, beat with an unfamiliar rhythm. I stood at a distance, the moonlight casting long shadows across the grass. It was time for the night's final act. The barn, with its rustic charm, had always been more than just a structure. It was a sanctuary, a place that held the echoes of laughter and memories like the walls themselves were made of them. And now, it was a fortress, holding within it the remnants of Karen's grandiose ambition. I imagined Karen among the guests, her voice likely shrill against the backdrop of music. She loved the sound of her own authority, the way it clung to the air like a cloying perfume. It was a pity she couldn't see the irony in her situation. Her party had become her prison, her own hubris. The warden, standing there, I reflected on the strange turn of events. Karen, with her unyielding grip on the neighborhood, had always underestimated the quiet power of resolve. Hers was a forceful hand, but mine was steady and sure, a gentle stream carving through rock over time. The plan had come together with an ease that surprised even me. A twist of the lock, a subtle shift in circumstance, such small actions with such profound consequences. I didn't relish the discomfort of those locked inside, but sometimes discomfort was the only path to change. The community had been suffocating under Karen's reign, her rules stifling like a too-tight collar, her parties, her demands, her unending quest for control all had worn thin the patience of those around her. This night was not just about reclaiming my barn. It was about reclaiming what she had taken from all of us. The minutes stretched, their passage marked only by the soft rustle of leaves. I imagined the scene inside, the dawning realization as the partygoers attempted to leave, only to find the doors unyielding, a bemused chaos, no doubt, with Karen at its heart, her composure that brittle shield beginning to crack. I had no intention of leaving them trapped for long, just long enough for the night to etch itself into their memories, a story they'd recount with embarrassed laughter, a reminder that some boundaries should not be crossed. As the first hint of panic simmered within the barn, I felt a shift in the air. It was as though the entire neighborhood was leaning in, waiting to see what would happen next. Karen, I suspected, would eventually pound against the barn doors, demanding release, with all the indignation she could muster. But the locks would hold, at least until the lesson was learned. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, restoring what had been skewed, giving voice to those who had been rendered silent. I turned away from the barn, feeling the weight of the night lift from my shoulders. The stars scattered above, indifferent witnesses to our human follies. Tomorrow, Karen would emerge from the barn with her pride bruised but intact. The community would find its voice again, a chorus of unity against a backdrop of change. And as for me, I would return to the barn, to its quiet solitude, knowing that it was once again my own, a home reclaimed, balance restored.